Hello and welcome to another magical edition of Mastering Dungeons. I'm Shawn Merwin here with the home from Winter Fantasy, and boy, are his arms tired, Teos Avadia. Welcome back, Teos.
Thanks, Shawn. It was so cool to be there. Everything except not getting to see you and also Mike Shea, who we thought would be there. But the Mastering Dungeons community was there in full force. We saw a lot of folks who are on our Patreon, Discord, and so it was really neat to see them. They all asked about you and missed you. And you were in everyone's mind with the Planescape Epic you helped write, with many other things. And so it was very cool to hear everybody talk about you. And then to get to hang out and play games with folks from our community was really neat.
Yeah, I feel terrible for missing, but the flu waits for no person, and as you can tell, I'm still not quite right.
I'm
Well,
so sorry.
still more not quite right than usual. But hey, we'll get there, and there will be future Winter Fantasies, and there will be future conventions. So thank you all who reached out and said that you wishing me well, and we'll get there. We will get there. But what
Yep.
we're going to do now is get to our listener corner, where we have a couple of questions. First, coming from Arthur Marquez via Twitter. Both in this episode and the last episode, you mentioned balance when talking about Shadowdark. Please specify, since balance may not be a pillar in which the game seems to be built upon. As a game writer, I'm curious why a game must strive for balance. Right. Great question. There are different kinds of games, and therefore there are different kinds of balance. Not all balance is necessary, but generally there is some necessity in some sort of balance in a game, whether it's a competitive game, a role-playing game, or any game. So let's start with the simplest game I can imagine, a competitive game that you might know as rock, paper, scissors. All right. If it was rock, paper, nuclear bomb, then the game would be ruined because that game is built specifically on balance. So right there, you need all three inputs into this game to be equal. There needs to be perfect balance. So there you have a clear, unambiguous, clear-cut case where balance is super important. It's vital, the most important part of the game.
And can I even throw in, a complex game like chess, right? We get the same pieces on each side mirrored so that we can have that balance as well. Great complexity, still balanced.
Right. And even like who gets to go first slightly unbalances the game.
Yeah.
To the point where, some people might say the game is ruined because of that.
Yeah.
Now, is that true? Probably not, but there's a case there. Now, we're talking about competitive games. That's one sort of balance. For non-competitive games like role-playing games, the importance of balance is in the same vein, but not as competitors. If you think of the game as, a group of people telling a story with someone leading it, the balance there is less important between the players and the game master, because the game itself recognizes the fact that the game master can do different things to self-balance the game. They can change the strength of foes that you're fighting. They can make completely new foes. They can change the way foes work. They can do lots of different things. So the balance isn't necessarily important there. The balance that's important in role-playing games, for me at least, is the balance of what are the players inputting into this machine that the game is. If I am inputting something that wins every time, and the other players are inputting things that do not win or rarely win or have a slimmer chance of winning, you risk throwing the game out of balance.
Yeah.
So when we talk about balance in a role-playing game, that's one of the things that we're talking about. It's not player versus game master or even player versus game. It's player choices versus each other and the weight that those things bring to the ongoing game and the ongoing story.
Yeah,
Um,
and it can extend in different directions, right? So for example, one aspect of it is reliability, right?
mhm,
Where if I can do a thing that will always work, but you do
mhm,
things that have often are going to result in failure, right? Like if you think of like the AD&D chances for a rogue to do stuff, a lot of them were just really bad percentages. So you would try
mhm,
things and you'd fail, right? So if
mhm.
you don't like falling off a wall all the time, you might,
Yeah.
decide that the rogue is sort of a pain in the butt. Whereas if the fighter's always hitting, that might feel really reliable, or whatever your examples might be. Another is the extent of what you can do, and damage is a clear indicator, right? If I can choose a
Mhm,
build that will easily cause great damage, I'm always the person taking down the monsters, and there is no balance to that, then you end out of whack. Or I think like 4E Saga for Star Wars had an interesting thing where the noble was very much a diplomat, but could do things on the battlefield that felt in line more or less with what combat geared folks were just shooting, lasers and stuff like that could achieve. And that allowed them to shine well enough while also being, the face of the party and those kinds of things. But in other games, the face of the party has no combat capability whatsoever. And now in those, whatever percentage of your gameplay that is, they feel like they're just, running around doing very little. And that's a tough sense of balance, right? And your balance can be spiky, or it can be, very low
mhm,
spikes. There's a lot of variations to it. And all that's going to impact the play of the game, right?
mhm. And so don't think of balance as two weights on a scale that are even when you talk about role
Mm,
play games. As Teos is saying, everyone needs to be and feel like they're contributing to the success of the group. In AD&D, at first level, wizards didn't do a lot, right? They could cast one spell and then they stood back with a crossbow or the
Dart.
staff or with whatever. And that seemed unbalanced. However, when wizards got higher and higher levels, now they were the ones that were often carrying the fighters.
Yeah.
And so, as unbalanced as that was, it was argued that there is a balance in the overall game
Mm-hmm.
that what you lacked at lower levels, you made up for at higher levels. And so there's different kinds of balance and there are different
Yeah.
ways to look at balance. No balance is going to be perfect, but you want that feeling that everyone's contributing, that no one character class, species, rule overshadows the others to such an extent that it makes the game not fun to play.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, coming back to Shadowdark, it is interesting in that interview that we've linked to before. One of the things Kelsey says is that she didn't really try to make the classes super balanced.
Mhm.
And that is really interesting, because when I look at them, I think there's some indications of that. Now I think they are fairly balanced, but there are some differences in how they're going to contribute in different scenes. And so it's interesting that it wasn't her design goal, to obsess about that balance. Um, how do I feel about that? I mean, that's fine, right? Like the game is still obviously a lot of fun, but it's always tough when you're playing a game and people kind of think to themselves, this is the way to do things. And I saw that in D&D this weekend at Winter Fantasy, where the healers tended to have massive capabilities to heal based on the fact that they multi-class,
Mhm.
right? So they're doing things like they are spending sorcery points to twin a heal. They are, pulling into these various aspects to derive the healing further than most classes. And there were very few characters who healed who weren't in those kinds of situations. And so it drives play in a certain direction because there's this feeling that that's what the game is begging of you, even though, You could argue that it's not.
Right.
Certainly Jeremy Crawford would say it's not. Jeremy Crawford thinks that you won't even choose an ancestry to optimize your character. Whereas that's bread and butter of what most players seem to do, is to choose ability scores based on their class, right? So those there can be such a difference between what the designer intends and how people react to it over time.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I hope that helps sort of delineate what we mean by balance. We mean different things in different situations, but overall, we're just looking at the game and trying to comment upon its flow and its play in the sense of everyone being able to contribute equally in the term balance as we've been using it here. So thank you for that question. And next is Battery Dennis via YouTube. I have now listened to every Mastering Dungeons episode available on the channel, and I have become accustomed to quality content. Thank you. I also have played an ongoing long-term Shadowdark campaign on a large hex continent built using the game random tables. I cannot help but be disappointed with this series so far. I would love if you guys put more effort into playing the game for a few sessions and then return and report on that experience instead of just reading through the sections. The reason why your methodical read-through of the 5e books was valuable was because you have extensive experience in playing and designing for that system. This Shadowdark read-through is not the same caliber. You simply haven't done the work required. It isn't a bad video, but I really feel like you don't have the experience required for multiple video read-through. The only saving grace is the book has a short word count, so we won't be blessed with too many episodes if you persist. I look forward to the news and business discussions. Thank you for your efforts, and my apologies for the criticism, but it is my honest feedback. And I wanted to make sure to read that out completely, because what Battery Dennis is saying is totally fair.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And well written.
Yeah, very well written.
Yeah.
And I want to be clear that we understand this. We are doing this not despite this, but because of this. We could and hopefully will have time to play Shadowdark, and Teos' case, play more, and then report back on our experiences. However, I truly, truly believe that there is value and lessons to be learned in discussing a game based on its text rather than on its play. When I have been criticized or praised for adventures or games I've written, I always have to understand that players are not criticizing the text. Players are criticizing or praising the experience that they had while they play. And that experience they've had while they play is not the experience that I wrote. It's the experience that the game master has created based on what I wrote. So I always am very, great. I try to be grateful. Thank you for those kind words. Thank your DM, because your DM is the one who gave you the fun time, not me. And I think this follows that that mode as well. We need to be able to understand and utilize the game as it is written, rather than as it is experienced through the lens of a game master. Can we also review a game based on the play of a game master? Absolutely. Can we also review a game based on the discussion of its creator? Absolutely. But I am choosing specifically not to do that because I want to see how this game looks on the page, to try to draw some lessons about then why it might be played the way it is played by different folks in different ways.
Yeah, that different folks in different ways is a key thing for me, because we see this a lot, Shawn and I, in organized play, where we will run an adventure, say the same adventure, for 4 or 5 tables. And if you judged it by any one of them, you might have a certain take on it. But when you run it across all of them, that starts to actually be where you really see what it's like. But if I just take a game system and I run it for the same table across 20 sessions, it's still heavily covered by how I approach things.
Mhm.
It's the different groups that really make it jump out, whether I'm DMing or someone else is DMing. With Shadowdark, it's been helpful to me to listen to things like I've listened to a lot of Mike Shea talking through his playthrough. I've listened to Kelsey talk about her design. I've listened to some other folks talk about Shadowdark playthroughs, including Graham Ward, who shared opinions. It's talked about on our Discord. But those things, while they're helpful, the curiosity that I have is specifically around how the wording drives play, and so going back to the wording is like going back to the source. And like you talked about, Shawn, an adventure can be great because of what the GM did, but what did the GM draw upon? And if we can go back to that, we can see what is it that enables or doesn't enable great play. What are the holes that are left there? And that's kind of what we're looking at in this review, right? I think there is a lot of coverage out there on Shadowdark, so there's no harm done if our approach, is something you want to skip for a few weeks. That's fine.
Mhm.
But I think that it will also hopefully be interesting to a lot of readers and designers to think through, what does the book's text actually tell you? And we compare that. If Shawn and I went off and played one campaign, then we would color it by our campaign. And that might be colored by all the different RPGs I've played, right? Whereas someone else who only plays D&D would have a different campaign and color it in a different way. So at the end of it, you get a different impression. I also think this comment and some of the other comments that have been sort of somewhat similar to these reveal just how great this game is, because people are passionate about it. And so when we review Blade Runner, not as many people are passionate about it. So they go, oh, hey, great, that's cool. I've been wondering about this. I thought I might pick it up. Thanks for review. Now I purchased it. Whereas a lot of the responses here are, I've been running Shadowdark a lot. You hurt me, or you didn't reflect how I see it. And that's fine, right? But it speaks to the game's maybe lack of definition, allowing it to be your game that you like your way. That may or may not be what's actually in the text.
Yep. Well said. So thank you for those comments and those questions. And now let's get into our news and commentary section, starting with the 50th anniversary of D&D again and again, and probably again and again and again and again throughout the entire 2024 campaign. So YouTube, on the D&D YouTube channel, the staff took turns reminiscing about their play, what the game means to them. They thanked fans for being a huge part of the process and guiding their design. Any thoughts on what you saw, Teos?
It's a lovely video. I really like James Wyatt with these really heartfelt moments, and several other people as well. Footage from various conventions. I recognized someone from Winter Fantasy in the video. Shows like AC Inc. And what I found myself thinking is, like, this is nice. I'm glad that the staff took this time to do this. And I think it also helps illustrate through their stories how personal it is for the staff to work on the game, how much it means to them that there really are this many people, because they show a lot of different faces, including Liz Shue, who's no longer there, but they show a lot of people sharing what their experience is like, and how much they've been playing. There was a kind of rumor that went around that was sort of nasty, saying something like that nobody is left on the team that understands the business of publishing or something like that. And sometimes people will say things like, oh, they don't have people who really understand older editions, or and this video did a nice job of making it clear that no, there are a lot of staff there that play all the time and really enjoy it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I'm sure we will get more retrospectives and thoughts about the 50th anniversary of D&D and what it means to people in the coming months. Well, what D&D means to Joe Manganiello has changed slightly as he speaks out on D&D after canceled plans for a Dragonlance live action project. So on February 8th, comicbook.com shared an interview with Joe Manganiello. He mentioned that the live action Dragonlance project he has been pursuing will not be moving forward. Uh, I, I could read all this. I really just don't even have much to say about it, other than, yeah, it's a business, and sometimes business things go poorly. Yeah.
I mean, I think that there's kind of, for the folks who want the kind of understanding of what happened, there were two sets of interviews on comicbook.com. One that was aired on February 8th but recorded earlier, and then the very next day Joe gave a second interview, and that one he really vents. Like, the first is sort of informative, this pilot isn't moving forward. The next was him just airing grievances. And every time that Wizards has worked with somebody like Joe in a close capacity, right? Like putting his character into Descent into Avernus, I get that feeling like, don't do these things. You might regret it, right? Yeah, sure, he loves it when you add his character to a book, but famous folks, you just can't. They're human like everybody else, and they may, because of the emphasis that's the spotlight they get, they may kind of act out, and then it can be really damaging. And this was one of these moments, because he says some very kind of angry things, and maybe he doesn't see it as that, but that's how it comes across. He says Baldur's Gate 3 is doing a better job than current design is doing to reflect what D&D is. He thinks that the team that designed 2014 is better than the current team, that they've drifted, and that Mike Mearls was sort of thrown under the bus, and that people took the opportunity to take credit for what he did, and there's a lot of this that's just, it's his opinion, and it gets magnified because of who he is, which is the danger of working with really famous folks like that, who have such reach beyond what a normal person who might work on a book does, right? And it's clear that Joe says, I got involved with D&D and I accepted being an ambassador and a paid consultant because I wanted this Dragonlance adaptation. And when he didn't get it in the end, right, then he's prepared to burn some bridges. And the hard part is Wizards can't really speak out, right? Because if they do, then it's going to become a tit for tat, and it's just going to get worse. So they just have to stay quiet and take it. And I found myself wondering, well, what would they say? And one answer came from Dan Dillon, who was laid off recently, star designer, been there through a lot of this. And he said, I deeply implore you to take the assessment about the D&D design team from anyone who wasn't on the D&D design team with a barrel of salt. And I think that's about as good as we're going to get from anybody at Wizards, right? Because they can't share their opinion like that. None of us know what it's like on the D&D design team and how they feel, other than folks like Dan Dillon coming out and saying, we really like working there. We're passionate. We believe in the 2024 product, right? And that's all we know. But it's always hard. And if you look at previous editions and what we've been able to glean from them, you get similar impressions, right? These are folks who are motivated, who love what they do, and it's complicated. It's not a simple output when you're trying to create an edition, right? 4th edition, 3rd edition. The perfections, they're hard to control or even see until it's far behind you in the rearview mirror, and you can really assess it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do know that they are still working on certain television shows, and probably video games, and probably a lot more that we're not aware of. So it's important to put it in the context of the whole, not just this one project.
And friend of the show,
yeah.
Dave Clark, kind of spoke to that on Mastodon, and I jotted that down here because I thought it was very astute. He's been carefully monitoring the success of the D&D movie, so he's been paying attention to this kind of topic, and so he said, why wouldn't this Dragonlance script going forward? Wizards can't answer that publicly. So what might there be the reasons? And he says, number one, there are at least 2 or maybe 3 other D&D series in development. Hasbro probably doesn't have the staff, attention span, whatever, to support more than that. The market may not support 2 or 3. So going and developing another one may just not make sense. 2, Joe has never produced, directed, show run any project before. So he's asking for a 9-figure series for his first project, and his qualifications are unpassionate. And it's maybe more than that, but I think there's some truth there that, like, the names we've heard for the D&D series are really proven people. And so there may be a little bit of that. And the third reason that Dave Clark cited was Paramount Plus picked up a D&D series already. They're in a giant development pause because they're being purchased. And so it may just simply be a timing issue. It doesn't make sense to go forward with this now because of that. And it may also be related to things like Dragonlance sales and so on, maybe, but it's probably bigger than that, and more the idea that there may be a certain tone or kind of story they want to write. The script may not be indicative of that tone that they want. They may not want to have a show that is just one particular world, so it has broader appeal. There can be a lot of reasons that are just bigger. And if Joe is coming at them always with this particular pressure on a particular type of project, then this may have reached the point where they just decided, you know what, it's better off to just say no to this. And there you end up. So you can take a look at the comicbook.com articles. Both of them are linked in our show notes, and you can search comicbook.com to find them as well. I think it is an interesting piece, a cautionary tale. It's a lot of things, right, Shawn?
Yeah. And if you don't want to look at that, and if you want to learn more about other games, Pelgrane Press has dropped a bit of knowledge on us. If you like Gumshoe, Night's Black Agents, Cthulhu Confidential, 13th Age, you can go to pelgranepress.com and check out their blog, where they've been providing some absolutely wonderful advice. Like part 2 of Read This Before Running Gumshoe just dropped, and the blogs give you a wonderful rundown of how to handle not just this game, but many games that involve sort of investigation. You can learn some lessons from them there. Anything you wanted to mention about that blog series?
No, I've been impressed by they clearly made an effort to kind of renew their blog, and they've been just great things, free downloads, like neat things you can get and access, and yeah, awesome tips. So if you're running anything Pelgrane or have been curious about it, check pelgranepress.com out.
And over on our creator corner, we are looking at the Sorcerer's Fate.
Well, I was going to say that I got a chance to talk to Andy Edmonds of Nerdronomicon.com at the show, and he had kind of at one point sort of said, like, yeah, I launched a Kickstarter. And he's so humble, such a nice guy, a ton of fun. We played Mothership together. We got to hang out some other tables. And he's just, I had to promote his Kickstarter at the tables because he's just so nice about it. But this is a zine, a 0-level funnel for Dungeon Crawl Classics, where there are about 1 to 2 sessions of fun in this. And he said it includes 8 new demonically corrupted creatures. There's certainly a horror twinge to this. 7 new confounding magic items, a pretty cool puzzle, handouts of creatures, essential objects and locations, and mayhem. And there's definitely this whole interaction between the village and the threat and the characters that seems like it creates a lot of a possibility for different types of play. And he writes about how he has written this to support people who love to just improv, or for people who really want to, take what's there and carefully dole it out and work off of it. He's trying to support both styles, which speaks to his breadth of creating types of experiences. $10 gets you the PDF. Print PDF is $15. It funded over the weekend. It ends February 29th. And I think it would be great if you're at all interested in a DCC game, then you should check this out.
Yep, you can again find that on Kickstarter, The Sorcerer's Fate.